You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday the 5th of November. Labour Party spin doctor Samuel Gamlin found guilty. Is Labour's Harriet Harman trying to save the BBC? The British National Party conference, all systems go. Strikes to mark presentation of austerity plan to Greek Parliament. 5 years or more to overcome European debt crisis. US presidential race decided tomorrow. Iran establishes naval bases on disputed islands. Thought for the day, homage to Imnokuffar. And finally, is it all flat caps, ferrets and whippets in North? UK news. The Labour Party spin doctor Samuel Gamlin, who was reported in the last edition of The World at 8, has admitted downloading images of children being abused from the internet. Many people have shown their disgust at the court that let him off with a supervision order and just 5 years on the sex offenders register. Gamlin from the Glees, Newcastle upon Tyne, refused to give officers his passwords to 2 hard drives which it is believed would incriminate him on a third charge. Gamlin, a photography student and communications officer at the Newcastle call centre for the Labour Party, was caught by computer experts as he tried to communicate with notorious paedophile webmaster Dominic Shaw in America. Evil Samuel Gamlin pleaded guilty to making 2 indecent images of boys aged just 12 and 13 years old. The BBC is allowing Labour Party Deputy Leader Harriet Harman to have a centre show all over other politicians on the BBC paedophile scandal. Harman, who was involved in the National Council for Civil Liberties, NCCL, affiliated with the now defunct pro-paedophile group Paedophile Information Exchange, or PI. The Paedophile Information Exchange backed the lowering of the age of consent and the watering down of child pornography laws known as the Lolita's Charter, putting British children at risk from predatory paedophiles. Now Harman has appeared on the BBC's Andrew Marr's show crying out for a proper inquiry over the Jimmy Savile and the BBC paedophile scandal, ignoring her own party's Labour 25, now 41, horrific sex attacks and rapes on children. A World at 8 reporter commented, "The BBC are using a politician who is most sympathetic to what the BBC has allowed to happen." He added, "The objective of using Harriet Harman could be to pass a law to lower the age of consent so that when the BBC paedophiles are exposed, the victims will be over the age of consent to put in their claims of abuse." The British National Party held their conference this weekend over 2 days. It was a great success and I'm sure all the attendees felt a new sense of optimism and left feeling as invigorated and ready for the fight as indeed we did. We had a short demonstration in Blackpool on the Saturday for Charlene Downs, which her mother Karen attended, and well over 15,000 leaflets were distributed. The residents in Blackpool were not left in any doubt as to whose flag we were flying and for whom. As usual, it was great meeting fellow nationalists and the hog roast, not halal, was gorgeous on Saturday night. My only aside was that although our landlady and the B&B were lovely, the bathroom was obviously fitted for the more seasoned visitors to Blackpool and the wonderfully cheap booze in the north, because you could sit on the bog and have your head in the basin at the same time. Great planning. Southern B&Bs, please note. European news. The Greek government, headed by Antonis Samaris, is to put forward its austerity plan today to the Greek Parliament. The plan being put to the Greek MPs sitting in will determine whether the money-strapped country will receive its European financial aid. A vote on the austerity plan near the end of this week's meetings will decide the outcome. There are strikes planned in Athens for 2 days this week to mark the debate. Organisers of the strikes say they will be peaceful. Fears have been expressed that hardline communist anarchists will try to hijack the strikes and that violence will exceed that seen last year. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has come out with a statement spelling certain doom for Greece, Spain, Portugal and Italy, and potentially many other countries in the euro fail. Merkel has said that it could take 5 years or more to overcome the debt crisis. A World Date reporter commented that Germany has a debt of trillions. How on earth can a country with so much debt possibly continue to bail out the Eurozone crisis whilst trying to bring in other Euro countries that have so little to give? World News. Mitt Romney faces Barack Obama in a winner-take-all race as the President of the United States is decided Tuesday. The Republican Romney is said to have a good chance of winning the election against Barack Obama. The last election saw the biggest turnout by black voters in American history, and tomorrow promises an even greater turnout. Iran has set up a naval base ostensibly to protect its people and country. The new naval base, near to international shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz, has been set up on islands which are claimed by the United Arab Emirates. General Ali Fadavi of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has said that a missile base and units of the elite guard have been placed there to protect Iran from any invasion. The US Navy and the Revolutionary Guard of the Iranian Navy patrol the fairly small sea route through the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of oil produced in the world passes through. Iranian leaders had in the past threatened to block the Strait of Hormuz due to deepening international tensions over its disputed nuclear programme, which the West suspected was aimed at developing atomic weapons, a charge Iran consistently denied. Now, thought for the day. I'm reading an article written by Imnokuffar. This gentleman, who along with our popular UK writer has inputs into World at 8. He is currently in hospital, having been run over by a French lorry, and has sustained various fractures, but has started to contribute from his sickbed. We all wish him and his family well, and this article is by him and for him. Contemporary and historic lies about Islam. One of the most touted lies about Islam is that it was a preserver, saviour and developer of civilisations. These untruths have been touted by many Western historians since the 19th century, and in particular after the First World War. These historians have implied that without Islamic civilization there would be no Western civilization as we know it. This is supposedly because Islam saved elements of Greek and Roman civilizations, mainly documents and interventions, elaborated upon them and created an Islamic civilization that was superior to both. This intellectual and scientific superiority was then donated or taken by stealth from Muslim lands and used, supposedly with the assistance of Muslims, to develop Western civilization. This article is a brief survey as to why there are so many question marks over the assertions made by various Western apologists for Islam, whose ultimate aim is to undermine the huge advances of Western civilization and to promote the cause of Islam. There are two different basic approaches to the question as to whether Islam is a promoter or a destroyer of civilizations. As mentioned before, there is supposed to be proof that Islam is and has been throughout history a saviour and promoter of civilizations. For centuries, scholars made the assumption that the civilization of ancient Rome was destroyed by barbarian invaders from Germany and Central Asia. The migrations of the Goths, Vandals and Huns were supposedly totally responsible for the destruction of Romanic-induced and supported civilizations and reduced Europe and all other Roman-influenced civilizations throughout the Middle East, Africa and elsewhere to barbarity. This also set in motion what has been called the Dark Ages. The fact of the matter is that Rome had been undergoing shrinkage and a constant reduction in influence for 3 centuries since the start of the Christian age. The final end of Western Roman Empire came in the year 476 when it was officially dissolved. This, according to some sources, marked the beginning of the Dark Ages. However, fresh evidence suggests that in fact Roman influence and civilization continued until near the end of the 7th century. It must be remembered that it was only the Western Empire that was dissolved. The Eastern Byzantine Empire continued to have massive influence, and virtually all of the leaders in Europe continued to have respect and obedience to the emperor in Constantinople. Many of the kings of these peoples, excluding the Britons, were raised and educated in Constantinople. Civilization and economy continued to flourish, including trade with the Eastern Mediterranean, and there was a recognisably classical civilization in Italy, Spain, Gaul and North Africa. Britain was an exception due to its loss to Roman culture in the 5th century and its subsequent conquest by the Germanic invaders. However, even here there was evidence of a much more robust survival of Roman culture than has been explained by the Western Muslim apologists. However, the fact of that matter is that sometime between the mid-7th and 8th centuries, the beginnings of the medieval age began in Europe, and the classical civilizations throughout the Middle East, Africa and Europe were extinguished. If you accept that this did not come about due to the supposed barbarian invasions of Europe, then why did this happen? And why should it be of interest to nationalists? It must be of interest to nationalists, because the history of our ancestors is what made us what we are. An understanding of not just our history, but of the history of the West is a crucial underpinning to our assorted arguments and our intellectual credibility. This understanding also serves to undermine the false arguments of our opponents. What did actually destroy these Roman-influenced civilizations? According to one source, Henri Pirenne, a Belgian, the source of destruction occurred at roughly the same time as the outflowing of Islam into the Mediterranean. It had become destroyed by the very people who were credited with saving it. The book is called Mohammed and Charlemagne, 1938, and is much quoted in a recent book by Emmett Scott, Mohammed and Charlemagne Revisited, 2012. He points out various facts that are purposely overlooked or misinterpreted by Muslim apologists. 1. From the mid-7th century, products from the Levant and exports from the West came to an abrupt halt. Items that were routinely mentioned and imported from the Eastern Mediterranean also came to an abrupt stop. 2. Gold coinage disappeared, as did trading settlements throughout Europe, and in particular the ports were severely affected. 3. Papyrus imports were stopped, and this had a massive effect, as this was necessary for the continuation of literate and mercantile civilization. 4. There is much evidence of piracy, freebooting and the enslavement of populations in coastal regions and anywhere that Arabs, Muslims, had proximity to. The appearance of castles and hilltop forts throughout Europe is directly connected to this phenomenon. These raids were often carried into the interior, and this led to the abandonment of agriculture and other trades throughout Europe. Large parts of the coastal regions of Spain, France, Italy and Greece were abandoned and uninhabitable. Some estimates put the total number of those enslaved in Europe, Ireland and the UK as being 1.5 million, between 650 and 1100 AD. Between 1600 and 1900 it is estimated that over 1 million Europeans were enslaved. 5. Syracuse, Sardinia and Spain were all conquered between 700 and 711 AD. Italy and Sardinia were under attack from 652 to 720. Constantinople was first attacked in 674 to 678, unsuccessfully, but was again attacked by 80,000 Muslims in 718. 6. All areas in the Middle East, Egypt, Morocco, Anatolia, Syria and North Africa that were defined by their Christian, Jewish and other faiths were overrun quickly and subjugated under the rule of the Muslims. Soon after this, all these areas were in decline in terms of their economic, cultural and trading regimes. The ruins of the cities formerly inhabited by these people scatter the Middle East and all other regions where they once lived and flourished. The point to be made here is that Islam was responsible for the declines in various civilizations, no matter where they tread. However, various Western scholars have purposely declined to comment on this. Instead, we have a commentary currently that gives Islam credit for helping build Western civilization when in fact they did more than anyone else to destroy it. It is a fact that the new technologies and methods of understanding them did not flow from Islam or the Arabs. Paper making and the compass originated from the Chinese, for instance. Optical science and algebra from the Greeks. as did various appreciations of philosophy concerning democracy. The concept of zero was originally Hindu. The distillation of alcohol, falsely claimed by the Muslims, was in fact invented by the Babylonians. Arab or Muslim scientists and philosophers wrote in Arabic, however most of them were not Arabs or Muslims at all, though some may have converted, but were Christians and Jews. Finally, the invasion of Europe by the barbarians during and after the decline and fall of Rome was not the cause of the rise of the medieval regimes that were overseen by the Church, a subject I have not touched on. The fall of civilisations and the beginning of medievalism were a direct result of the rise of Islam, that at its core is only interested in war, conquest, booty, slavery and making non-Muslims inferior to them. These principles of Islam have not changed, nor can they be, as they are an intrinsic part of the Quran. A question that is rarely asked is this: if Islam is such a progressive and educational cult, then why are virtually all Islamic nations technically, educationally and socially backward? Why are Muslims who trumpet their religion as a religion of peace always at war with unbelievers? The answer is that Islam extols war, the imposition of slavery, taxing, killing and the torturing of unbelievers as a sacred duty. However, our academics extol this cult as an ideology that is enlightened and tolerant. They save all their criticism for Christianity that they regard as being intolerant, unenlightened and barbaric. They constantly trot out the theory that the Crusades were acts of intolerance and barbarity and ignore the fact that they were in fact a reaction to the barbarity, intolerance and slaughter perpetrated by Muslims for centuries before the Crusades happened. Islam has no need for education or for technological enhancement, as it can take what it needs from the unbelievers, and any coherent reading of history will bear this out. It is an established fact that 80% of the world's 1.5 billion Muslims are totally illiterate, and that most of them only understand the Quran as it is explained to them by the mullahs. Always remember, Islam is not a religion in the Western sense of the meaning. It is a political, social and theocratic construct that governs all aspects of life, not just for its believers, but for its conquered subjects. Nor is Islam a race, it is a belief construct that anyone of any colour can ascribe to. The Western historians and philosophers who ignore this and treat it as just another religion are dangerous fools, who have misconstrued Islam in the light of multiculturalism and political correctness. We as nationalists must always bear the lessons of history in mind and actively oppose those who seek to impose falsehoods on our fellow nationals. Islam represents the greatest threat to Western society in our collective history, and should it triumph, the light of civilization will be extinguished. The only party that has the sense to see the threat for what it is the British National Party. And finally, who said that the North was all clogs and whippets? There is a battle royal over the traditional flat caps between two pubs in Chorley, Lancashire. When New Bar persons banned them, their rival, Trader Jack's, put up signs stating, "We do not discriminate against flat caps, clogs and whippets also welcome." Gary Roberts, operations director at Amber Taverns, who owned Pearson's, explained, "The main background is that when any gentleman used to go into anyone's home, they normally remove their hat. It's just something we've always done." The boss of Trader Jack's, Danny Howell, has stated, "Some people think they hide people's identity. We welcome them, and we've had a lot of people moaning about it who come in. So my business partner Johnny wrote on the window and put a bit on Facebook, and everyone's having a laugh about it. Someone told us to put clogs and whippets on too. It's mainly because lots of places don't allow caps anymore. Oh dear. Going the same way as most of our English culture, Flat caps and whippets rule as far as I'm concerned, and I'm a southerner. They have however left out ferrets. You cannot leave out ferrets with their little ferrety faces. You can take your headgear off in your home, but not a public house. You can see a person's face if they wear a flat cap. Designer pubs are absolutely deadly. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynne Mozar, and I wish you all a very happy and safe Guy Fawkes night. Please keep your pets in and your fireworks outside, and also keep them away from little fingers. Good night.